Put your faith in the light.
Hello guys, welcome to another one of my videos. This is Lightblade. Well guys, 9.1 is almost here. We're almost at that door. We're on one day away from getting some new content in World of Warcraft. So I think it's a good moment to talk about Retribution Paladins and all that has changed in this PTR cycle and how are we going to fare in 9.1. So let's start with the video. Okay guys, let's talk about the conduit bug fixes that we got. So this is the most important indirect buff that Retribution Paladins got in 9.1 because these two conduits are extremely powerful and they will have some impact on how we pick our conduits next patch. So the first one is Virtuous Command. This is a conduit that we are already using most of the time because it's a really big increase in damage. As you can see on your screen, Virtuous Command is a 5-second buff that we get that increases damage of Templar's Verdict, Crusader Strike, and Blade of Justice by a percentage depending on the conduit item level. The bug fix here is that before, Virtuous Command wouldn't be refreshed after throwing a second Judgment. So for example, if you threw your Judgment and after that you used Divine Toll, you would only get one Virtuous Command proc for 5 seconds and the second one would be ignored. Now that's fixed. Any judgment that you throw after your first one will only refresh the buff and you will continue doing the extra damage from this conduit. Take in mind that Virtuous Command at the moment at a 226 item level will give you about 13% extra damage on all of those abilities. So it's extremely powerful conduit in single target situations. It doesn't actually lose much value in AoE because you will still be using Crusader Strike and Blade of Justice to generate holy power in those situations. So this is a pretty good buff to Virtuous Command. It will probably be a 2% extra damage for overall to Retribution Paladins, and it will double the extra damage of Virtuous Command in your overall results. So now let's go to the next conduit that got bug fixed. So Truth's Wake is this conduit that you can see on your screen. It does extra damage as a dot after we use Wake of Ashes. It's a percentage of the damage of the main Wake of Ash. The problem with this conduit before, it only did the base damage of your Wake of Ash. That means if you buffed it, for example, with a Avenging Wrath or whatever extra damage you gave it, it would only take into account base damage, the base Wake of Ash. So it was losing a lot of damage. Now it does the correct amount. So that's a nice bug fix. And now that we have an extra offensive conduit that we can put in the Pelagos tree, I think Truth's Wake can be a solid choice. Or we can also use the other conduit that increases the damage of Blade of Wrath. But those are the bug fixes at the moment. So guys, now let's talk about the new legendary changes. Okay guys, so for legendaries, Retribution Paladins got 4 new legendaries, 1 for each covenant. Unfortunately, 3 of those legendaries are kinda bad because they don't have any impact on how we play our classes. Those being the Night Fae, the Necrolord legendary, and the Bentir. Those legendaries aren't really useful and those covenants have better options to use of our old legendaries. But Kyrian got Divine Resonance. As you can see on your screen, this legendary, every time we use Divine Toll, we will get a 30-second buff that every 5 seconds we will throw a Judgment. This is extremely powerful in single target situations because of the buff to the bug fix of Virtuous Command that I talked before. If you think about it, every 5 seconds we throw a Judgment. Virtuous Command lasts for 5 seconds. That means we will get 30 seconds of uninterrupted Virtuous Command extra damage. Take in mind that Virtuous Command will scale higher this patch, up to 14 to 15%. So that's 14 to 15% extra single target damage that you will be throwing to your target. That's huge, and that's every 1 minute because Divine Toll has a 1-minute cooldown. Pretty powerful legendary for all Kyrian Paladins and basically makes Kyrian the de facto best covenant for any Retribution Paladin that's doing high level content. So this legendary also doesn't lose value in AoE situations, that being not heavy AoE situations. In heavy AoE situations you will be still wanting to use your Tempest of the Lightbringer, but in certain dungeons, like for example Spires of Ascension and Theater of Pain, this legendary will have huge value. Also in tyrannical weeks it will also be extremely powerful to take down bosses because of 14 to 15% extra damage that you're doing on single target abilities for 30 seconds. So for where to put this legendary, I recommend putting it in the waist slot because this legendary can be made in the chest and the waist. But since chest, head and shoulders are going to be occupied by domination pieces of gear, if you're raiding, I recommend putting it in the waist. For what stats do you want on this? I recommend putting some haste and mastery because since we're going to be using more abilities in the window of purchase command, I recommend having a bit more haste so our global cooldowns are shorter and we do use more holy power spenders and builders. Other than that, guys, that's the Kyrian legendary. It's extremely powerful and you should be making it as fast as possible if you're a Kyrian player. Okay guys, now let's talk about the Soulbind changes that we have. So I'll be only talking about the best Soulbind that Retribution Paladins will be taking on 9.1, and this one is Pelagos. Pelagos is just extremely powerful because he gives us a lot of stats, and Retribution Paladins love stats because all of our abilities increase damage percentage, and whatever increases the base stats of our damage will also be increasing the damage of our percentage increasing abilities. So let's talk about first the nerf that we got. So Combat Meditation got a 10% nerf. So it will only give 315 mastery for 10 seconds instead of 350 that it gave before. This nerf isn't really important because I'll be talking about one new Soulbind ability that offsets this nerf, and it gives us a bit more mastery than Combat Meditation gave us before the nerf. So now let's go to the new Soulbind things that we have from Pelagos. He gives us one more offensive trait that we can fill in with any of the other ones. I recommend using Expurgation in Silken target situations or Truth's Wake if you're doing a lot of AoE, since it got fixed with the bug fix. So for the new Soulbind ability, we got Better Together. This is the best one to pick out of the two new ones that we got because the other one is only quality of life and movement speed increase. It's not really useful in PvE situations, but Better Together is really good because you increase your mastery by 40 for 1 minute and you also increase another person's mastery by 40 for 1 minute. This basically offsets the nerf that we got to Combat Meditation because it increases our mastery by the same amount we lost. So that's really nice. We also get a new Endurance conduit that we can put there, anything that helps you survive, I think. So I would actually put there Divine Calls, so we get more Divine Shields in the course of a dungeon or a fight. So the last and the most important thing we got from Pelagos is Newfound Resolve. So this Soulbind ability is extremely powerful. So there is a chance that a small ghost will appear. You have to look at it till it disappears. After it disappears, it will give you 12% increased primary stat and stamina for 15 seconds. This is huge because primary stat is extremely powerful for Retribution Paladins because it increases the base damage of all of our abilities, and this base damage will get further increased if we're using cooldowns like Final Reckoning, our Avenging Wrath, and Seraphine, because all damage cooldowns multiplicatively stack with each other. So this is going to be extremely powerful for us since we love primary stat. And the stamina bonus is also nice because it makes us more durable and we can take a bit more punishment if we're in a hard fight. So guys, that's the best Soulbind that we have, and now let's go to my final thoughts about the patch and what do I think about Retribution Paladins and raiding and Mythic Plus. Okay guys, my thoughts on raiding and Mythic Plus about Retribution Paladins. So let's start with raiding. So in raiding scenarios, Retribution Paladins brings a lot of stuff like a flexible damage profile. We do have burst every 1 and every 2 minutes, so that helps a lot with bosses that have vulnerability phases. We also bring some utility to help, for example, the main tank, in that we can, for example, Divine Shield and Blessing of Sacrifice them to save them from extra damage taken without ourselves dying. We have our immunity, our bubble that can help soak mechanics. We don't have that much mobility because our horse is kind of meh as a mobility spell, but we can also keep ourselves alive by just spamming heals. So we're a pretty flexible class, and in terms of damage we're in the middle of the pack, and I think that's a really safe and nice place to be because we don't get nerfs. That's the most important thing, that your class doesn't get nerfs. And we are a class that scales really well with stats and scales better the more stats we have. So Retribution Paladins will always be fairly strong in raiding situations, and our single target damage is extremely solid now with the addition of the new Kyrian legendary, the Divine Resonance I talked about. So if you guys are going to be raiding, don't be worried about anything, Retribution Paladins will be great. Okay, now let's go to the next part, and this is Mythic Plus. As for Mythic Plus dungeons, guys, Retribution Paladins are really strong because we have a lot of sources of uncapped AoE, those being Final Reckoning. We can also spec to Sanctified Threat to get the explosions to do uncapped AoE damage, and we also have our legendary Tempest of the Lightbringer that brings a lot of uncapped AoE for our Divine Storm. It's 20% damage of the main Divine Storm. So other than that, we also bring a lot of burst every 1 minute. So our damage profile is really flexible if you're a Kyrian, because every 1 minute you have your Divine Toll combination with Seraphim and Final Reckoning, and every 2 minutes you have that on top of your wings. Our burst damage is really nice to have, so we can get rid of packs that are problematic really fast. And we also have nice single target damage now with our new Kyrian legendary that also doesn't make us lose value in AoE situations, because it still generates some holy power to keep throwing Divine Storms if you're doing AoE damage. So it's a really nice time to be a Kyrian Retribution Paladin. We have a lot of advantages on top of our normal utility like Devotion Aura, a Blessing of Sacrifice, Blessing of Protection, Immunity, and Blessing of Freedom, and other stuff that helped us cheese mechanics and help our tank, our healers, and our other DPS. And so Retribution Paladins and Mythic Plus, in my opinion, are going to be a strong and a really nice solid class that you can bring to your group if you need a melee class to do them. Okay guys, that's the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it and found it informative. If you did, leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more content. Thanks for watching.